Sometimes it is a case of the village crazies getting together and reminiscing together on their shared hallucinations or not shared hallucinations that they happen to reminisce over together. Other times though, it's the people of the village who were often chastised for their curiosity or were individually held back due to a lack of collective knowledge. Now these people are able to form social networks and connections that enable them to flourish both individually and collectively. The same kinds of people that 300-400 years ago may have studied all of the local beetles in an area are now able to connect and create open source software that is a pillar of technology. There's that XCXD meme about like some open source software that holds up the whole internet. That's a real situation, and the only thing that this is enabled by is this plurized existence of humanity. How many great things have been built or been able to have been built because of open source software or open source philosophy, open source learning, open source language? Overall, the point I'm making here is that the T has enabled us to feel this virtual substrate in a way that has often been forbidden or prohibited or simply just out of reach from most people until they get to extreme wisdom aged amounts of years. Plurs and by extension parasociality, it's a way for us to coexist and move and live within this virtual substrate, this virtual understanding space. It allows us to swim within the flows of information that exist, to have more control and directional influence than like a water molecule being shot out of a fire hose. It's more like existing as a fish in the ocean or a bird in the sky. Parasociality has often been demonized because of the need and demand of a one strong central messaging from a institutionalized power. To have alternative media figures and thought leaders that are not part of this systematically parasocial dynamic is dangerous for the institutions in charge. That's why so many great leaders throughout history have been removed, right? MLK, Malcolm X, JFK, Princess Diana, all these people created obstacles or barriers or reasons for the institutionalized plurs, the systematically parasocial cultures, to feel a need to step up and make some action. That's why so many great leaders and revolutionaries and thinkers in America and abroad have been terminated. Both government and non-governmental, power is not a monopoly of the state, and they are always pruning themselves and others in an attempt to maintain dominance. Those that were systematically parasocial on behalf of the government and institutions at play did what was needed for their plur to thrive in their understanding space at the time. Often this is organs of the government, three-letter agencies, and the like. But often this is also smaller plurs that are part of the larger plur feeling empowered to create this change. Parasociality is not a waste of time or a necessarily negative interaction. Parasociality is a term used to describe the plur relationship between spectator and spectated. Parasociality allows movement within the virtual substrate as a plur, rather than attempting to have you move as a sing. An example would be a fish instead of a bacteria, or a bird instead of a bacteria. Parasociality enables this multicellular virtual organism rather than a single-celled virtual life form. Parasociality, or at least commonly held ideas and ideals of it, are blatantly incorrect. Modern interactions and parasocial dynamics are often far more orthosocial than initially believed to be, purely for the reason of existing within the virtual and how interactive the internet is. And this is as if we didn't already exist in the virtual before, just in less crystallized forms. The virtual stored in books and cave walls and scrolls and wisdom inside of people's heads rather than all over the internet. But these ways of existing, witchery and wizardry, sidesteps of the dominant systematic parasociality, they've always existed and they always will exist in various names and formations. In a time of increasing informational freedom, in a time when people are capable of commanding more and more attention than ever before, while also giving others attention at high levels as well, we find ourselves forced to relearn what it means to be social. We find ourselves having to relearn what it means to create social connection. When you're able to cultivate a relationship between millions just by taking out your phone and talking to them on a live stream, and you're able to interact two ways, it's a very different landscape than one where you are sending out messaging over the course of weeks or months in a newspaper, or even one where you're singing to millions of people across America on a television. Not all technosocial relationships are positive, but not all parasocial relationships are negative. The evolutionary development of human sociality has never stopped, not since the dawn of time. Sociality will constantly change as the material conditions, both physical and virtual, are progressed and modified and continue to update. The current environment calls for a world wherein the gods of the wire, as demonstrated by serial experiments Lane, is typical, if not expected. Attention is king, and plurs are the only way to remain safe.
Except, of course, there is no other man like you.
But you're not God.
No, I'm not God. Not a devil. Just an ordinary mortal man.
No ordinary mortal is able to survive at the hands of gods, and even many gods will fail to thrive and survive. Whether these gods are businesses, are local activist communities, are political ideologies, are ID poll identities, are family connections, are geographically based institutions. No matter what these gods are, it's important to find yourself in relation to them. On this point, even if a plur leader identifies as a same, they are inherently and ultimately still tied to those on the other end of the parasociality.
I just pulled off the coolest parachute stunt ever. He made a turn so close to the surface of the water that the edge of the parachute touched it. And that's not all. He also landed perfectly on this small platform.
The glider is still tied to the person on the water, and vice versa. The people on the water are still tied to the person in the air, unless they choose to let go. We exist together in plurs, whether we hope to or not. I encourage you to reflect on your own relationship to these things, and make sure you're functioning in a way that you're satisfied with, in a way that is truly intentional. It's really easy to get swept up in the information flows and shot out like a water atom in the fire hose. But it's also easy to allow yourself to get drinking. It's easy to get swept up in the flows of information where there's nothing to help ground you in relation against. That's all I have to say, I think. In general, all I want to say is parasociality is much more nuanced than most people would lead you to believe. And I want you to know that it's important to have both parasocial and social dynamics, and you should always keep learning. Fight for the people's power of information. Thank you, I love you, and you have a wonderful rest of your night or day or morning or whatever time of evening this is for you. Thank you, goodbye.